Okay, so this is Final Boss and Fiction, my diction down below. Anyways, we're gonna do a quick analysis or talk through of one of the many writing tips we've collected over the years. This one is from a book I very strongly recommend called The Fantasy Fiction Formula by Deborah Chester, I think. Great read for anybody, even if you're not writing fantasy. But this is the quote: "Never shift viewpoint within a scene. Never shift viewpoint within a scene. Never shift viewpoint within a scene." Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I like the spirit of this tip. There are two things I want to point out about it. First is I don't like ultimatum kind of language in tips because it encourages writers to absolutely follow the rule and not really understand why this tip is a tip in the first place. So you always have to understand that the rules are only the rules. Um, Rules are just sort of a history, let's say, of what's worked so far for a wide span of use cases. It may not fit what you are trying to accomplish. It may not fit all scenarios. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to be able to understand that there are situations in which this would not be the best tip for you. The other point is, which kind of piggybacks on what I was saying, is that you can shift viewpoint within a scene. That's called omniscient point of view. So if you make a decision that you want to do omniscient point of view, then obviously this tip doesn't apply to you. I think what this tip is actually speaking to is don't unintentionally shift viewpoint. Don't shift viewpoint by accident. Be mindful of whose point of view you're in, what perspective you're taking, and really try to stick to it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would rephrase that too, which is don't shift viewpoint unless you're really sure that's what you want to do. And and like that's the thing. Like omniscient viewpoints are very effective, but they are really tough to pull off. Like I have been writing for years and years and years, and maybe I think maybe once in short fiction I attempted it and it didn't work. You know, like so it's something that you can do if you have the knack for it, great, but it's something that takes an immense amount of, it's sort of like the risks you take versus the skill you have kind of are in proportion. So you can make some big gambles and do some things, but if you don't have the time and the practice and kind of the foundation built up, I think it was like Picasso. He was very good at painting, kind of very like portraits, standard forms before he started branching out and doing other things. And this is kind of a similar thing, right? Where like you really want to make sure that you have a very strong knowledge of how a scene should work and those types of things before you start messing around with viewpoint, because this is one of the things I actually will tell writers pretty regularly is you can have some not perfect character development, you can have some not perfect plot points, but if your point of view is not perfect, that's the one thing that will break your novel. Not perfect character development, it's still readable, you can kind of know what's going on. Hey, maybe you don't like that character, they're kind of flat, but you can get through it. Not perfect, plot. Okay, maybe this middle bit was boring, but we got to the end. Not perfect point of view, and we're jumping around. It really can shatter your story, like in a much more. As why I think this Deborah is using very extreme language in this quote, because as opposed to like a flat plot or little parts that aren't so good, like when you give a reader something where the point of view is broken, where you either maybe started in a close third person and then became omniscient by accident, or those types of things, or you're not, or you're in close third but you're kind of like jumping around without clear like chapter divides, section breaks, whatever. It can be really tough on the read, and it can be it can be like, like make something that maybe has good characters and good plot unreadable. So that's like the one thing is like point of view is something that nobody really talks about that much, but it's one of the most I think important things that like if you don't kind of have at least a general sense of it, it will be like it'll break what you're working on. I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Dan, or am I over hyping the
You cut
dangers?
out for a little bit because my internet, but
Oh,
I think that that's probably right.
yeah,
It's about creating like a consistent mechanism within your narrative. So if the entire narrative you're like in third person of this one character and you're not going into any other characters and you're not slipping into first person at all, and then suddenly you slip and do that, then it's going to be jarring and it's going to bring readers outside of the story a little bit.
yeah, completely agree. So yeah, it's like many tips, kind of like what Dan said. It's not always right. Like it's more for a new writer who maybe won't be aware of the dangers of a pitfall like that. It's something to really take seriously, and maybe that's the takeaway is like take it seriously. When you start messing with point of view, you can break your novel like pretty seriously. And so um, be thoughtful about it and do tests. Like if you're writing, if you want to try some more experimental stuff with point of view, maybe write a few first chapters, a few versions of your first chapter, and see, test with some beta readers and see if those people are jiving with what you're doing with point of view. Because if they're not, it'll be a really tough situation to realize you've written an entire novel with this kind of approach to point of view, and it's not easy to decipher for the reader. So, anyways, that is the tip of the afternoon. So, chat away in the comments when this is on YouTube or in Twitch chat if you have questions. Later.